Good evening and welcome to Financial Literacy for Small Business. This is session 1. Thank you all for coming tonight. We have an excellent program planned and we're going to do this in a series of 3. Most of you know that. So thank you for being here. Tonight's agenda, I'm going to do a course overview of the next 2 courses. We'll have some updates from our SCORE facilitators. And then Dr. Adrian Allen of Shaw University is going to talk about startup costs. And then I will speak to you all about pricing your goods and services for profitability. Jay Graves is going to talk about his experience with pricing his consulting services. And Sharon Shelton is here to speak to us about how we remain healthy and take care of ourselves while we're starting a business. For this session, session 1, it's all about the startup. This program was designed as a course that takes you through the life cycle of the business and the financial considerations that you should have at each interval. So tonight we'll do startup. In session 2, we'll talk about how you manage everything during the growth phase, tools that you will need to make sure you're staying on top of your financial picture. And then in session 3, we'll speak about a business that has matured and some of the things you can start to do to secure your financial future as well as your employees. Our team will update you on what they've done and what they've been doing since our last session closed out. So we'll hear from them also. Now we'll hear from Dr. Adrian Allen, Associate Professor at Shaw University School of Business and Professional Studies. We'll have some Q&A, and then I will follow with my presentation for tonight. Thank you all so much again for being here.
I'm Dr. Allen. A little bit about me. I'm a native North Carolinian, and most people are not so much. I have a big background in academics, but before then I worked in marketing, sales, banking, auditing, and a lot of other things. The things I do best is volunteering. So that's my niche. Right now, the new thing I'm doing is managing the credit union at Shaw. So I'm learning a lot more about the front end of banking versus the back end of banking. So that's what I'm doing now. One of the things I like to share today is how the beginning of starting your companies. So let's look at a little bit of the formation of the organizations. So usually, most times, when you start your company, the attraction is to sole proprietorships, primarily because there's not a lot of opening charges, costs. You can start it from anything. You don't have anything at all, except today I want to start a business, but I want to caution you that perhaps we need to start capturing costs from the beginning. If you did any research at all, market research, considerations, any type of thing, capture those costs. You can trust them to the organization. But one thing about the sole proprietorship, it's easy to get into. Sole mean you. Look at your personal credit, your personal asset, everything that deals with you. We talk about flow through and taxation, profits and losses, they're attached to the owner, personal income tax, all of those good things. They're not so heavily regulated. However, position yourself to prosper. In a small business, you want to grow. You want to be successful. So we start looking for the next one, which may be a LLC. As much as you're in control of your profits, your assets, your liabilities, those things are also attached to your debt. Liability is a key component. If you're sued, it's personal. If you need financing, it's personal. If you want to prosper, can you do that based on personal? As you grow and prosper, remember that it's attached to what you do as a small business. So consider the future. You do not have to register your business with the state, but I will caution you that I prefer that you think about the name. If you have a lot into your branding, make sure you can use the name in case you want to do an LLC later. The more you gain, the more you have to protect. A LLC, protection. Now with this one, you can have more than one business owner, or you can have as many as you want. The key is the structure of it. You protect your assets. You also share the liabilities as well. So if you ever get into a situation where there are some instances, the state will support you and you cannot come after your personal assets. Very attractive. Taxation is the issue. Same as before. If you have 10 partners and we all say we're splitting liabilities, assets, profits, and losses, you may not be taxed at the same rate. It's based on your personal taxes. So always consider what is the next step and how that's going to be. But it's very flexible. So you have some limits to what you can and cannot do. There are fees attached to it. You have to know the articles, what is stated in your, if it's more than one. What are your agreements? What are your business fees? What are your registrations? What are your legal fees? Especially if you have more than one partner or one person operating. Then we talk about partnerships, not so much that you may be a partner, but if you can, because it's set up somewhat similar to a LLC. Partnerships are general professional, and we have some professional businesses, dentists, psychiatrists, those types of things. Those are generally setting the parameters as what you're going to operate. General partnerships, they share everything, even to the liabilities. However, it's limited, you set the limits of it, and they may not operate the same. So set the structure up front. But remember, there's costs associated with everything. Insurance, malpractice insurance, all of those. Capture every cost. Sometimes we think that those are insignificant costs. They may be insignificant at this point, but what about moving forward? Because we're always thinking success. And the more success you have, perhaps the more costs you have and the more profits. And S Corp, S Corporation. This is an interesting one because most people think it's a whole different business entity, but actually it's a tax status. So it could be an LLC moving through. We're moving our taxes through. So alternate names, small businesses, right? Corporation, S chapter, subchapter S. How's it established? Could be a trust, could be a person, could be any type of interest, but the IRS established the parameters around it. This is very popular because most entrepreneurs now, we have almost a 50-50 break and they're using this status based on the tax structure. It's still a tax flow. You spread the taxes with your partners. Some limits are, can't be over 100 members. Partnerships, domestic registration, still have taxes, but it's still split the same way. But with that, you definitely need to talk to your accountant on it, but have to be LLC first. So it's a tax structure and not so much a corporation, different, can have both structures. One thing that's key is that most time when you're sole proprietor, at some point you will move over to an LLC based on progress and based on success, because you still want to protect yourself. Registration, distinct legal entities. What you need to do depends on the business structure. So you always need to determine first the employee ID number. Employee ID number. It's not always required, but sole proprietors, you can use your social security number. Most businesses have some type of fees for your federal agencies, activities. Definitely look at what you may need, especially if you need certification, specialty products. What's in your industry? What's accustomed to it? The state of North Carolina has a good website. You can go through and mirror every single thing that you need. We have several upfront costs to launch a business and before you start bringing in revenues. We have what we call one-time expenses, ongoing expenses, and startup assets. And all businesses may not have the same ones, but we do need to start thinking along the lines, what may I have before you get into it? Ideally, do a little bit of research, not so much your competitors, but what may you need initially. Do you need permits and licenses? Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. Incorporation fees. What's your logo? What's your design? Branding would be everything. Even to the point, if you want to be called by your name of your company, that's good. people will start knowing you. Do you have a website design? Do you have brochures and business cards, signage, down payments for rental properties, improvements to any location that you may have? What type of deposits may you need? And this is not all inclusive, and sometimes it may not be exclusive either. You may need and you may not, but these are some things to consider. Ongoing expenses, rent, payroll, taxes, utilities, legal services, insurance, loan payments. Even with payroll, if you're one person, well, I'm going to operate my business all alone, especially since the pandemic. What happens if you're sick? How much will a temporary service cost? Can these services be done by somebody else? How much would that cost you and you still make a profit? You don't want to shut your doors, especially at the height of your popularity for your business or service, special products or services. Other expenses you can think about for the future or startup. Do you have inventory? What type of computers would you need? Is it good to invest in something a little cheaper, then 6 months later you have to buy something else? What is the best product to begin with? Office equipment. Do you need a phone system separate from the one that you have? Office supplies. All of these are costs that you need to consider. And this is relevant to any type of business that you need. Open a business account. When I open a nonprofit account, I opened with $100, but when I opened a business account, it was $300 at the same bank on the same day. But the EIN number, you will need that. Your business formation documents, ownership agreements, business licenses. Make sure you have all the documents that you need when you go in. Do you make another trip? To mirror some of the costs you may need, especially if you're going to expand, there's a business calculator. And the accounting fees, we'll have an accountant talk about that. But just some of the costs you will have, start looking at some of the things that you may think you would need. Nothing is too insignificant. Start keeping up with every single thing, because with volume and time, it's going to add up.
Okay, Dr. Adrian. Dr. Angie, how many questions do we have?
There are currently no questions in the Q&A to everyone. We do have a Q&A. It should be at the bottom of your screen next to the raised hand. I do see a note here. Someone's speaking about a registration error. We'll send you a note to address that after this call. I'll shoot you a note, Chantel. So there aren't any questions here. Does anyone want to go live to ask a question? Oh, I see
Well,
three
Dr.
raised
Angie, let's just move forward. I thought there may be some questions, but this is kind of a consecutive.
I do see 3 raised hands, Patty.
Okay, all right then.
First raised hand is Gabrielle. I'm allowing you to talk now. Go ahead. You'll need to unmute.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. I didn't need to click that.
Okay. No problem. We'll go to the next raised hand.
And Dr. Angie, there is also in the Q&A, we have 4 questions now on Q&A.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Denise, you now have permission to speak. You'll need to unmute. Denise Hargrove.
I didn't have a question.
Okay. Amanda, your hand is raised. Do you have a question? If not, if you go to the bottom where the raised hand button is, you can unraise your hand. Okay. So for the Q&A, we now have 5 questions, Patty. The first question is there a certain amount of money you need to make before your LLC can change to an S Corp?
No, there isn't. You can organize your business in whichever way you'd like to before you ever make a penny. So no, there is no financial requirement. You should speak to your accountant or whomever, or your attorney, and decide what the tax implications will be for either one of those and the liability. So it has nothing to do with revenue or income.
No, it does not. Sometimes with the S corp, the owner may decide to draw a salary versus keeping everything in the organization. And at some point, I know with the sole proprietor, a lot of times people say, I'm not going to draw a salary, I'm not going to pay myself. You do need to pay yourself, or you need to at least start thinking that you can't work for free forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. So the next question is, as an LLC, do I need a registered agent?
The registered agent with a business, they require you to have a registered agent. And what that is, where are you going to get your legal documents? You need somebody over the age of 18 to get your legal documents. You may not be an attorney, but who's going to receive those documents on your behalf? So you need to determine who that person is. Because remember, the state is not going to run you down. With those, you have some annual fees that you're going to have to look at. But initially, who's going to get those documents? If you get some summons or some legal documents, where they're going to be received and who's going to get them? Who's responsible?
And that can be yourself.
Yeah,
It could be your permanent address. So don't let that trick you up, Amanda.
right.
Put your permanent address on there and know that if any official document needs to reach you outside of a PO box or an office, it will come to that address. It's a great question.
Some
And I want
CPAs
to make
do,
a comment. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say some CPAs will do that as well.
Yeah.
So for my personal business, I have everything come to me. I'm the registered agent, but I'm the president of a nonprofit. And our CPA firm does that because the board will change over time, but that CPA firm most likely won't. So you also have to think about, turnover and your position within your own company and your future, what you want to do.
Right.
Sorry,
And I'll add to that.
That's good, Jay. I didn't have anything to add.
LLC, I was going to say, as an LLC or corporation, you're going to file a report with the Secretary of State every year.
Mm-hmm.
And when you file that report, you have the opportunity to change who your registered agent is. So it's in no way permanent. You can change it every year if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
So the next, it's a statement, actually. I think I'm not sure what you're asking about. What about trademark? You need to be a little more specific, if you will, Heidi. While you're doing that, feel free to go in the Q&A and rephrase that for us. The next question is, how do we register a new company as an LLC? Can I do it by myself? What is the easiest and cheapest way to do that? And I think Bill already answered that. But you would go to the North Carolina Secretary of State. You would click on business, and then you can search your business name, which I highly recommend. Once you do, it's a step-by-step process, articles of organization, and you would just complete that. It's pretty simplistic. Submit it, pay your fee, you're done.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Dr. Angie, because even if you don't want to go through all this as a sole proprietor, you can hold the name of your company. So I recommend, if you're not going through all this, don't pay all these fees at this point and just want to keep this, hold your name. It's like $30, $35. Because back to the trademark, if you go through all this and this name is already trademarked, especially with LLPs, they can tell you, stop using my name. And if you don't, they can sue you. So if it's a name you're going to be attached to, your brand, and you know that, hold the name. Just pay the fee.
The other piece about that is businesses can have the same name in different states. So you do want to find a way, to distinguish your name from others.
Right.
Next question is, hold on one sec. Can you grab that question? I was told to start as an LLC by my tax person before going as an S corp. What do you think about this strategy? I am just starting out.
You have to be an LLC before S corp. Remember, the S corp is a tax status, so they kind of go hand in hand. Or not just an LLC, but S corp is a tax status, so you have to be something and lead to that. So that would be a good idea. And remember, the LLC protect your personal assets.
Trying to get to that next question. 1 second. Okay. Any recommendations for a good CPA? We're probably not going to do that on this call. How would you like to handle that, Patty or Bill?
Well, we at SCORE, we do have a vendor recommendation list. It is on the Raleigh.score website, so you can go there. There should be some accountants on that list. And also, there's plenty of people on the line tonight. Maybe some of them may have a suggestion for you. If someone has a good CPA, please put it in the chat.
Well, I noticed one of the businesses is a new, I believe, bookkeeping and tax company, because I will say this, I don't use a CPA for everything. I have certain things that I use a CPA for. It is your choice and how you do that. And I'm not recommending you do that. I'm just sharing for myself. I use a non-CPA bookkeeper and tax preparer, and I use a CPA to audit my books.
I was going to add that the distinction of a CPA is that they are allowed to do audits, which frankly very few CPAs do. But in terms of tax advice, accounting, etc., the CPA designation really doesn't specify anything about that. So sometimes we think we need a CPA. You do need a really good accountant, and you need somebody that's really going to do your bookkeeping. And CPAs, as a rule, don't want to do bookkeeping and don't want to do payroll. So for bookkeeping, seek out a bookkeeper or a bookkeeping service. And to do taxes, seek out someone that does tax preparation, an accountant, or a CPA. But most of us as small business owners will seldom need the services that a CPA is certified for, which is auditing.
Thank you, Bill. Patty, there are a couple of more questions. How are we doing on time?
You can go ahead.
Okay. With an herbal tea business, would an S Corp be the best to start with?
I don't know. That would be an accounting question. And then also I would think about revenues, but I would ask the accountant. Now, Sterling Porter, Miss Patty, he would be here next week, right? He's a great accountant.
Yes.
And he has accounting business as well. So these are a lot of questions that you can ask him. He's very good, probably as well as some of the other ones on. And remember that when you do CPA and all these come with a cost, and you may not need all of these to start. If I was still doing small business, I would just pay the CPA when I want to audit.
Yes, we will have an accountant on next week. And so how many more questions do you have, Dr. Angie? Do you have a few more?
Yes, 2 more.
Okay.
So someone is divorcing and their ex-spouse is registered as the member manager on their annual reports. They can't seem to remove the person and list themselves as member manager. How do I do that? I believe you can, in your annual report update, change that. If not, there's a phone number for the North Carolina Secretary of State person who handles registered companies. They respond very quickly. So I would encourage you to reach out. The young lady is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I would just like to say, any legal issues that you have, if you're going through a divorce, these are things that you bring up to your divorce attorney, and they can actually put that into the agreement that your spouse resigns from all of boards or whatever. So that is something you can do. I hope you all never need that, but just keep in mind, you can have your attorney to take care of that. And when they sign the final document, that ends all of that.
Absolutely.
So someone asked another trademark question. Should you trademark your business? I think that was the question about what about trademark? So you wouldn't be trademarking the business. You would be trademarking your name, a product or symbol, that you wholly own. For example, like I trademark my logo or register it. If you just do a quick Google search, make sure you're going to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and not some of these third parties that charge you a fee, because they can charge you fees and you never get anything back. So it really depends on how unique that brand is. For example, I'm sure Nike trademarked their brand, and other companies at that level. It's certainly something to look into. And I don't think we have any trademark experts among us.
No, we don't.
The last question is, before going to NC Secretary of State website, do I have to make sure that the name is not taken by anyone else? And what we're saying is, when you go to that website, there's a place to search company names. You can put your company name in, and if it shows up, that means it's registered and taken by someone else. If it does not, then that name is available to you.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
That is, wait a minute.
Yeah. The thing is, don't be intimidated by the website. It's very user friendly. You're going to go in one step at a time. And it will help you every step of the way. And the staff there is very good.
So this question is probably going to be for a tax preparer, accountant, or an attorney. I want to start another business to sell online products and create an LLC. How would that affect my taxes? For what I've read, I would be taxed as a sole proprietor since it'll only be me. I would not take that one.
Right. We'll save that. I hope you'll come back next week, but we don't want to try to answer any accountant questions or CPA questions tonight, just generically. So if you'll just hold that and come back next week, we'll have Sterling Porter here. He's a professor and an accountant, and he'll be here to answer those questions.
I saw a question in the chat. How can I get funding for a startup? I have an LLC.
Well, the first thing you need to do is, if you're looking for any type funding, even a grant, you need to get a good business plan written. Anyone that gives you money or hands you money, they're going to want to see a good, solid business plan. We've been teaching business plan with this group for the last 2 years, and we will teach business plan again in the fall. So that is your first step. You need to lay that idea out on paper with the numbers and everything that goes with that plan. And then you can go and look for funding. Even the venture capitalists, all of them, there are some things they want to see. You just can't go there and stand up and say, I have this great idea and this is what I'm going to do. They want to see the full Monty.
Including your financiations. So definitely attend the rest of these classes.
That's right.
Yes.
The financials, and they have to be realistic. Even if they don't look so great, they have to be realistic and move forward with it a few years.
All right. Are we ready to move on, Dr. Angie?
Let's do, there is one last question here, and then we'll go back to the other ones when we're done. There's more questions coming in. Can an LLC have subsidiaries?
Have what? Subsidiaries. I don't know the answer to that.
I'll try to answer that. Somebody stop me if I say something incorrect. An LLC can be the owner of another LLC, and I'm going to assume that's what you mean by a subsidiary. So an LLC can't be a member of another LLC, and from that perspective, yes, an LLC can have subsidiaries, or as I said, the owners of another one or more LLCs.
So Patty, we'll come back to questions when you're ready.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move forward. One of the reasons that we really wanted to do this is because as I mentor on a daily basis, I find that the business owners really get stuck when they project their income or try to price their products. So they can put together everything that, they go and look everything up, and then you ask them, what are your income projections? And they are just like, what are you talking about, and have no idea as to how to do that. So I want you to know, I'm going to show you some things tonight from the standpoint of a business owner. I am not an accountant. I don't profess to be, but as you are owning a business and managing resources for a business, there are some things that you need to know just to function well as a business owner. Just keep in mind, this is a perspective of a business owner. So what are the resources required in order for you to produce the product or service that you are going to deliver to the public? That's what we want to drill down on tonight. What do you need in your business, labor, whatever, to produce that product? And once you produce it, how are you going to deliver it to your target market? Now, Bill has taught us a lot about target market. We've gone over this several times, all of these other areas. So we're just going to briefly mention those things, but we're going to talk about, as you walking the street, managing a business, some of the things you need to know to keep you safe so that you definitely will be able to make an educated decision on what you buy or sell or whatever. The reason you need to understand it is because it helps you once you get, we're going to talk about your cost per unit. And when I say cost per unit, I'm saying that we want you to narrow down the smallest element of what you sell. Are you selling 1 hour? Are you selling one cake? Are you selling one cookie? We need you to get it all the way down to just one, because then you can do some math and multiply and get where you need to go. But you're going to have to get it all the way down so that you can do that. And once you do that, you'll know if your business is efficient or not. You'll know how to make changes when the time comes, and you'll be able to zero in and make sure that you're going in the right direction. So for tonight, I'm going to concentrate on 2 areas. I'm going to concentrate on direct labor and direct materials. Of course, you see this overhead cost number here. That's what Dr. Adrian was talking about. There's plenty of overhead, and that varies. But I want you to get these 2 things right here, your labor and direct materials. And your accountant will know how to handle the overhead piece. But this is what you need. These 2 things, direct labor and direct materials, if you don't get those right, you may never need the accountant or the CPA. So I want you to get there, but you've got to understand this. And the reason I'm driving that point home is when I try to teach it to some of my clients, I get resistance. They just don't want to go down that low. They don't want to hear it. They're like, well, I can just charge this. And I'm like, no, it's like you're going to jump off a cliff. You got to know where you're going. And when I can get them to stop and look at it, we really get somewhere. So your direct material costs, your raw materials, your packaging, freight, storage, taxes, and this is any materials that are directly related to producing that product or service. There may be other things unique to your business, but if it's directly related to producing that service or that product, then it is a material cost. Your labor would be your wages and benefits. And, with wages, of course, you have payroll taxes. That's in there. But if it's labor that's directly tied to producing whatever the product is or the services, then that's what we need to understand. And you don't need to understand it to the point that you can punch it in and do all of that. That's for your accountant. But when you make your daily decisions on if you will accept a contract or if you will take whatever bid, you have to have this knowledge to be successful. So I'm going to start here with a services business, which that I'm going to talk about the hours. Most people that do a service business, I'm going to do it from a consulting standpoint. We're going to talk about your cost per unit or your cost per hour. There's many ways that this can be done, but this is the one I've chosen. So if you are a consultant and you get a job, you've got to sit down and decide how many hours will that job take. So that means you have to know your capabilities. You have to know the capabilities of your team. You need to know all of that. And also, if you started a business and you left a job making $15 an hour, you need to be sure that you price your goods and services so that you don't end up making $8 an hour because you didn't get it right on the front end. So you have to do this. You can't just throw it up in the air in order to be successful. And the rate or whatever that you want for your hourly rate, that is what you consider the value of your time to be. There are some people, the value of their time is $500 an hour, some $70, but you decide what that is, and you need to decide that right up front based on your business. There may be some unique things in your business that need to be considered, but if you're going to be in that industry and you're a business owner, you need to know exactly what that is. So for this demonstration, I decided to use a photographer that's working by the hour. If you're a photographer and you say, I want to make $145 an hour, that's all fine and good. But if you have not included your cost and your overhead, your equipment, most of the time now when you do photo shoots, you get a flash drive. There's an expense. There's travel to the location. Also, sometimes the photographer may take pictures at a place that charges a fee for you to come in and take photos because they've got beautiful stairs or they have beautiful artwork. So when that photographer says $145 an hour, they need to be sure that somehow they've accounted for this, or they're going to charge the client an extra fee. Now, in a lot of consulting businesses, you can charge an additional fee for all of these expenses. But as a photographer, most people just want to see what are you going to charge me and what am I going to get? So if all of this is not considered, it's possible that they can end up making less than $100 an hour because they didn't consider all of the costs that were involved with what they were trying to deliver to the public. So let's look at this a little bit further. I used the hourly rate of $145. And now keep in mind, you all, this rate right here, this is after your market research that Bill and Jay and all of those have talked to you about. You've done your competitive analysis. You know where you are in your community. You're looking at this, what is your experience? So this number needs to be realistic from the start. So on the unit cost per hour, what I projected was this $20 are those expenses like the flash drive and whatever other little things. This $70 right here, I put this in for an hourly rate. If you had so much business that you needed to use other photographers, then $70 may not be the right rate, but you'll need to pay them something or you can't grow. So basically just straight lining, your potential profit per hour would be $55. So let's go back to this $145. Since you said that's a good rate for you and what you do, I just mentioned that it's so hard for businesses to project their revenue. So your unit cost basically is 1 hour for one photo session. But basically that session may take 3 hours. So you're charging $145 an hour. If it's 3 hours, you have the potential to make $435. Now, if you were doing your business plan and you were projecting what your revenue would be, I suggest that in the beginning, you don't project yearly revenue, not in a small business. I suggest you project it by the month, because that way you can watch it a whole lot better. You can pay attention to monthly and kind of track where you need to be and see if you're hitting your marks. So if you decided that in the first month you wanted to do 10 hours, then you would project that as your revenue. And then if you decided the next month, you might want to do 20 hours. So that's how you get your revenue. But you have gotten this number, your lowest common denominator, your hourly rate, that's how you will project your revenue. And then you start to do math from there. So we projected here that your potential profit, if you're using these numbers and all of this is accurate, and you've done the research, that you could potentially be making $55 an hour. But if you do that photo shoot for 3 hours, you have the potential to make $165. Now let's look back at this. In the beginning, most of you are doing your own hours. You're doing the photo shoot. You haven't called anyone else in yet. You're going to do as many of those photo shoots as you can before you call in someone to help you. So this $70 right here, this is your sweat equity. You get to keep that if you're doing the job yourself. And if you do 3 hours, you just added $210 to this number down here. I hope you all are following that. So when you do your own work, you're keeping additional dollars for the company. But hopefully you grow so that you have to hire someone, and you may have 5 photo shoots going on at one time. So on the ones that you do, you get $55 plus $70, which is $125. But on the ones that others are doing for you, you get $55. So you're still making a profit. Now let's go with if there is a product. When you have a product that you deliver to the public, there are raw materials and ingredients, or whatever you want to call it, that go into producing that product. This is the work that you need to do in order to determine how much that product really costs you. Let's say if you bake cakes, that cake has flour, sugar, butter, it has all of that in it. And you can buy that in bulk. So what you're going to need to do, say you get a 10-pound bag of flour that may have 30 cups of flour in it. Each one of your cakes takes 3 cups. So you've got to figure out, if you paid $8 for that 10-pound bag of flour and you got 30 cups out of it, you divide that $8 by 30, and that's your amount. You need to do that with your butter, your sugar, your flavor. Everything needs to be done that way. So if you have a raw material business, it is of benefit to buy everything in bulk because it's going to be cheaper when you do that. But you need to sit down and break it down and make sure that you know how much goes into one unit, one cake, one cupcake, however. And then that raw material has to be assembled by someone, which is labor. If you make the cake, you put it together. If someone else does it, there needs to be an accounting for labor. And so, as I said, I'm talking about direct material costs and direct labor costs. I'm staying right there on those for us tonight. And then once you get that cake or whatever it is put together, you need to have packaging. And the packaging needs to be such that the product is delivered to the client intact and safe. Because if it's not, if it gets there and it's crumbled up, then it's going to get thrown away. They want a refund. You just lost the labor. You just lost everything. So you've got to account for safe packaging for your product, and even sometimes shipping, but that's kind of negotiable because you may be able to get your client to pay for shipping, but you've got to decide what's the right packaging to make sure it's delivered on time and intact. For the product example here, I'm going to use a custom picture frame. When you take pictures to be framed, most of the time they don't just pull a standard frame, wood there, and they put that up and see what you like, backing. So that's what I'm going to use. So with picture frames, these are some of the things you'll need. You'll need the wood, the glass, glue, padding, hooks, backing. There's probably many other things that you'll need. As I said, you buy these in bulk. And so you need to decide, whatever the size the frame is, how much wood goes into it. You need to know the cost for that. There's different types of wood, and the frames differ if you're using hickory wood or whatever the wood is that they've stained and got it together, there's different prices for that. Or they may use particle board, allow for it. Someone has to assemble that picture frame. You can do it for a while, but you hope that your business grows so much that you have others doing that for you. And then the shipping costs, allow for that. Maybe like most of the time we see online, if you purchase a certain amount, it gets shipped for free, but those are large companies sometimes that do that. As a small company, can you afford to do that? So going back to the custom picture frame, this $60 is what we are saying you would sell that frame for, whatever the size is. And keep in mind, depending on the different sizes, you would need to do this projection or these numbers on each size, not just one, because a 5x7 frame would certainly be different than an 11x14. So we're saying you'll sell this for $60. This $12 is some of the glue, the wood, and all of that stuff. And then this is labor. This is $15 an hour at an hour and a half is what I put in there, because if the person really, knew how to do it, they probably could do it in that time. However, I don't have the payroll taxes in there. Now, you may be able to use somebody as a contractor where you don't pay payroll taxes, but if you have them on a W-2, there's going to be at least an additional 7.65%. That's your part of that. That's not included in here. So potentially you could sell it for $60. These are your expenses. This is your unit cost that we've come up with. And you could potentially make $25.50 per unit. So if you were going to project your revenue, you're sure this is a good price, you've done your market research and you're sure $60 is good, then what you would do is decide how many of these picture frames would you love to sell in a month. That's a good barometer. If it's 50, then you're saying I would bring in $3,000 that month. Maybe the next month you want to do 55, and then you up those numbers, according to if you're $60. And as I said, if there are other sizes, you may have a $60 frame, a $45 frame, but all of it needs to be accounted for. Don't just lump it in. In a small business, you have to account for every penny. It's just more effective when you do that. So potentially, if you sold 50 of those, making $25.50 per unit, then your profit would potentially be $1,275. Now, let me just say this. When we get down here to this profit, this $1,275, that is what covers all of those overhead expenses that Dr. Adrian talked about. If your business is going to be successful, so you're going to need to sell more than 50. This $1,275, that is the profit that is going to have to cover all of your overhead, anything else that's going on in your business. So you may, once you do your numbers and see where your break even is, you might need to sell 200 a month. And then to really start making profits, it will need to go higher. So when you talk about the unit cost, the practical use for that in your business is for revenue projection, which we just did. We looked at profit, and it also will show you whether your business is operating successfully. If you run a business for 3 to 5 years and you're still putting your paycheck in the bank, you may not have gotten some of those numbers right up front, or you may need additional marketing. There's something that is going on that you missed, or maybe it's the supply chain. Maybe part of the product you're trying to produce, the price of one of those elements that you so keenly narrowed down to, the price went up so high, you've got to raise your price. But once you break it down the way that I've asked you to do that, you'll quickly see that. And it will also help you for resources, when you know that you need a certain amount of wood to make those frames, you can start planning for that. And you're projecting how many you'll sell. It will help you, your cost per unit will help you to plan for your raw materials, how much time it takes to make that product, and for your delivery and shipping costs. So that's what you're able to do with that number. And I highly recommend that you all do that. Don't fight your business consultants when they ask you to do it, because it can be the difference between success and failure. And I know that you all know people that didn't do any of that and they're making money hands over foot. It's because they may have gotten lucky and they projected it, or they knew enough about the business to get that number right. But if you're a small business owner and your resources are tight, I would not take that chance. I would like to see you all do it with some education in mind. And even when you do this, you still sometimes miss something. You don't get everything, but the more that you've allowed for and looked at, it will help you to have your business on solid footing. And you're able to pivot a whole lot quicker when you have some solid documentation. Dr. Angie, I'm ready for questions.
Well, you have them. That was great. Let me go to the one I see in the chat first, and then I'll go to the Q&A. I'm in construction framing houses that the general contractor subs everything out to. So they supply the material. Now, labor is where I have to break everything down. I'm new to this.
You're absolutely correct. I don't know if they are paying you a lump sum. If they are, you've really got to watch your labor. But now if they're telling you go frame this house and you can spend as much time as you want, and I really doubt that. So probably they're giving you a flat rate to do that framing. So man, you need some good people that will work efficiently and get that thing done so that you at least make something on the job. I hope that was helpful, but that's exactly what you have to do. You can't just let them willy-nilly work and not get the job done so that you are barely breaking even, or that you have to go in your own account and pay someone.
Yeah, Pat, so I'd add to that, particularly in terms of construction. One of the keys to success is doing an effective estimate, so that he would know which jobs to take for a particular rate and which jobs not to take. So your key there, as I understand your question, is having the ability or having someone that can estimate what it will take to frame the house from the labor perspective, so that you can then go, given what you're paying your labor, can you make money at what the general contractor is offering for that particular project?
That's exactly right. What I would add is that we talk about those types of things, time, cost, and material. Even though they're supplying the material, you still have material. Do you have the tools to reach it? Do you have the tools to do a 3,000 square foot house versus a 1,000 square foot house? Can you scaffold that high? And then you have the skill set. So if I price the house at 3,000, I keep that. But if I price it at 1,000 square foot house, that's a totally different price, because then the skills may change and you can't make any money.
Next question, Dr. Angie.
I'm trying to get to the bottom because a lot of the questions are from earlier.
Okay.
Almost there.
And I know you all, this is not simple, but as a business owner, you're going to have to dig deeper and understand this, because when you're a business owner, you need to know something about every aspect of your business. And what I just went over, estimates, pricing, which jobs you're able to do, as Bill just said, that's the part that if you don't know that, you need to learn that quickly.
Okay, you ready, Patty?
Yes.
As a startup, how do you determine monthly profit for business plan when you've not had any clients yet? That is a great question. A realistic dollar of amount of services you provide. Worried about accuracy on my business plan.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, on the business plans I see, most people know how to put down their rent, utilities, and all of that. So when I showed you those numbers, the $60 per hour, once you do all your research and you decide what your product is selling for or what your service is going for, it's going to be, I call it guesstimation. That's what I tell my clients in the beginning. You don't know how much you can sell, but you're banking on the fact that I have marketed this business. I'm going to be able to sell this many the first 6 months or the first year. And you just have to put those numbers out there. Your expenses you can pose, but your revenue, unless you've been in that business and you know your clientele, you're not going to be able to exact that. Now, after you've operated a few months, or you may start to get a comfort level with it, and you may go back and look at your business plan and it was totally off. But that's when you're going to have to just pay very close attention to everything. You're going to have to do a guesstimation at first, but be educated on your industry and your business, and it should be fairly close, but it may not be. Anyone else want to address that?
I want to chime in on that, Patty, because that is a valid point. I love the guesstimation process, or what we call a WAG, a wild blank guess, begins with A. And sometimes it's just that, to start out. So you take that first gig. I love the monthly expense tracking or projections, Patty, because you get to really monitor it and see it side by side. So I have a consulting practice. I charge an hourly rate. And when I say my hourly rate, people look at me and say, wow, that's a lot. And when I start subtracting the people that I have to pay to help me do the work. So I'm a trainer consultant. So my rate, my fees are based on an hourly rate that I back into several types of contracts. It might be a firm fixed price. So in that case, they want to know that they're paying me $50,000 for the gig. I have to determine, though, how many hours go into that to make sure that that $50,000 isn't going to put me in the red, depending on everything else that I have to buy. As a consultant trainer, I'm buying a lot of little things that add up: name badges, tent cards, printing costs for the PowerPoint presentations, training materials, snacks and refreshments. Those things add up. All that's being deducted. I have an intern who I pay, and then I have a virtual assistant who I pay. So I do avoid some of those taxes for having them on payroll or W-2s, because they really are part-time and they do work virtually and at their own pace outside of the work they're given. So these are some things for you to consider. Is it good for me to do a firm fixed price? Should I do time and materials? I love a time and materials because now I can bill you hourly and expense you for all those things I just named. Sometimes they want cost plus expense. Well, those things are fading further and further because companies don't want to end up eating that high bill either. They have a budget too. So you really have to think about what is best for your industry. And I'm not going to lie, the first gig I had, I lost money. I spent every dime I made. However, it earned me 2 years of contracts. So in the end, it was worth it. So yes, give it your best guesstimate and grow it from there.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that too is, and I think this kind of goes back to some of the business classes that we've talked about bootstrapping and other different ways, right, of funding your business. And a lot of us are going to self-fund, right, in many situations. So with those projections, I've seen some people, they have a lot of confidence and they're like, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to start this business, and this is what I'm going to make. Matter of fact, I just talked with somebody that I'm mentoring a couple of weeks ago, and they were ready to roll like that. And I was like, you got to be careful, because this could be a WAG, this could be a a guess here, right? And this is a new area for you. So, we've done everything we possibly can in your business plan and looking at your financials and projecting the best we can. But man, did anybody predict COVID? Like, did anybody predict what could happen tomorrow? Like something that could throw a wrench into your business and your expenses? What if they double? You rely on fuel. Look what's going on with fuel. So I was like, hang in there, right? Hang in there, get some buffer money from the job that you have right now while we continue to work on your business plan, because you can't rely on that guess that you just did and hope that you're going to hit that number immediately coming out of the gate. Because as Dr. Angie said, I'm in consulting as well. And it took a little bit of time to really kind of flush out what that flow looked like. So just make sure you're prepared when you take that leap.
That's right.
I'll offer a couple of additional things from having worked with the business owners that I've worked with over the last 20 years. As small business owners, particularly when we have a service type business, our tendency is to underprice our service. So I thought when Dr. Angie said that she quotes her rate, the person says it's high. Frankly, if they don't say it's high, it probably is way too low. And if the price is too low, it's really hard to sell enough to get enough profit. And then the other thing I would offer is that whether people buy or not is not a guess. Sales works in ratios. And so when you think, how many sales or clients do I need this month to produce the revenue that I want for my business? Then the thing to do is just work that back, because the question you need to answer is how many opportunities or how many proposals do you need to make? If you're going to close 1 out of 10 people that you propose to, and I want 10 sales, then I know I've got to go out and get and deliver 100 proposals, one way, shape, form, or other. And the thing to do is, just like you need to do all of your financial work, and you do need to do it, then you need to do the same kind of work around your sales to produce the revenues. You really don't want that to be a guess. And you don't want to underprice your product or service, because then it's almost impossible to sell enough to make the kind of money that you want to make it need to make.
Yeah. If you underprice yourself so much below the market, that's why you have to do a little bit of research. The perception is that your product is not as good as the market, right, even if they say it's high and it's the best it is. That's what the perception is. Mm-hmm. And they may not even want it if it is the best. So sometimes I call it opportunity cost, right? You still go out there and you price it. And if you want to bargain with them and tell, I'm going to give you this one-time exception, and when you're in there, you're working, but this is my rate. And you can do some other things. Mm-hmm. I've worked jobs for free because I knew this clientele that was in this particular one with consulting, I got other business. Mm-hmm. Opportunity cost. I gave up something to get something. And sometimes you do that, but I didn't undercut myself. I helped myself. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, sometimes I'm going to do it half price. No, I am going to give you this one-time concession. And you make it very clear. And the only thing about business, you have to step to it in business. You have to talk business all the time. If not, you can't be a coward when you're handling business. They're going to treat you that way. Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you raised that, Dr. Adrian, because I want to speak about the fact that as people of color, we tend to fear putting a true value in talking money. Mm-hmm. This is how we survive. My mentor, Les Brown, says money isn't everything, but it's up there with oxygen. You got to have it to live, right? Exactly. And we do need it. And so if you believe your value proposition for your service is worth $250 an hour, then you need to try to hold out for that. Now, to Dr. Adrian's point, opportunity cost, love that. To get in front of them at a lower rate, just be careful, because once you go in at $125,
You stuck.
they might want you to stick to that. And now you're doing it for a whole year and you ain't making no money because your cost of goods / services sold is 125 because you gave them all your money.
Mhm.
So this is an important conversation, and why this group and why specifically Patty Williams has been driving us to have this conversation. This next question, I think, is very important for all of us to hear. The question is, and I'm glad you were brave enough to ask it, what do you mean show them your financials? Explain, one of you explain that, please.
Jay said that.
No, I'm saying the question the person is asking is, what do we mean?
I'll explain it. Numbers or dollars are the language in business. And as we'll talk about next week, there are certain financial reports, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow forecast. That is where that language is communicated. And so when Jay, I believe, said you got to show them your financials.
Mhm.
If you have a business that's up and producing income, revenue, then you would show them those documents for the business. What Jay was referring to is as we start out, our businesses don't have revenues. You're going to have to show them those documents on your personal finances. And you, frankly, you don't have an option about that. Wherever you're getting money from, they're going to see something that allows them to make an appropriate decision as to whether they will get their money back or not. And the language of business is dollars.
Right.
And so that's the language. One of the languages we have to be able to talk and communicate in. And when you're starting a business and the business doesn't have financials yet, then it's your financials, your personal financials, that the banker or the commercial lender is going to ask you for. And if you're going to have any opportunity to get any funds from them, you're going to provide them. So that's what showing your financials means.
That's what it means. We do a lot of things with cash, or we'll say, I'm not paying myself. Yes, you are. If you're going to do this, take a draw. If you're going to pay somebody, I'm going to pay them cash. No, you're not. And you start giving them a 1099. You have to stop absorbing so many things. And what they're saying is, I know this cannot be possible based on what you just said. And perhaps it could be, but you're not capturing all the costs. We know it's somewhere else. And they can look at realistic things. I can help you based on this. I cannot help you based on all of this because this cannot be true. Write it down. Your accountant can help you. You don't have to know how to do it. You just need to keep up with it. Manage it a different way.
So when I started my business, my first year, I did what I called a soft launch. And I monitored my revenue, my projections, my expenses, my pricing, so that I could analyze how close I was on or off. And then my next year, I was able to level set my rates to make sure that I was making more of a profit. And including those overhead things. So I now have rent. I have an office space outside the home. I now have to have insurance and all those things that go with that. Those are those direct and indirect costs that Patty was talking about. You have to get savvy. Now, I am not a financial person. However, some of you might have heard my story. I lost my shirt having a very successful company and bringing in a business partner who was a whole lot more financial savvy than I was. And he was stealing money right out of the company, even though I had brought him in as a partner. And by the time I figured it out, we didn't have any money. And I was not savvy enough, equipped enough, skilled enough to read the financial reports to see what he was doing. I was smart enough to ask someone to help me, though, a mentor, and they saw something that raised a red flag. And so it was one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned about my money. And it just goes back to Oprah's message. I don't care how much money you make, know how much money you have. And as the billionaire she is, she knows where her money is going. So we have to own this thing, and we have to quit being afraid of handling our money. It is the language of business, as Bill said, and we need to own it like bosses. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me stick to the Q&A and then come back to the chat. This is from earlier, Patty, or whomever. Is there a resource to find credible manufacturers or product development companies for new product development? Anybody want to take that one? That's out of my area.
Yeah, I just recently read an article that there's a manufacturing association of North Carolina, and they're getting ready to have a conference. It just came across my desk recently. So I would do some research to find out where the manufacturers gather in North Carolina and who they are and what they do, and just go from there. But that came to me just this week, and I was like, oh, I'm not doing anything with manufacturing, and I just flagged it on. But just research it, because there are organizations around that, and that would be a good place to go, because most of the time when there's manufacturers, there's some of the better people in the industry. So I would suggest you do that.
So this is a good question too. As a startup, how do you determine monthly profit for your business plan? That's the wrong one. I already read that one. If it is an LLC and you do the labor like described in your presentation, Patty, do you pay yourself from that money, or how does it work?
I will say you're the last one to get paid.
Amen, sister.
Yeah, and I know that for sure. So this is my advice to people I work with now. If you have a job that you can keep as you build your business, I want you to keep it as long as you can, until you wake up one day and you say, my business is so busy, I don't have time to go to work. That's how I left my job as a nurse at the hospital. I had so much on my plate. I was like, I don't have time to go to work. So I said, I just need to work on this because it's bringing me more. So you getting paid, all those expenses need to be paid and all of that. So if you project your income and watch your expenses, you'll know when you reach that point. A good business plan is going to show you that. My business plan showed me that it would be 18 months before I could get there and pay myself and leave my job. So I knew when I hit 6 months and I couldn't leave my job, I wasn't weary, because I knew it was 18 months. So that's why we drive home and we beg you all, please do this business plan, project it out on a monthly basis, go out 36 months, 40, and you'll see when the numbers turn black and how much of that you can keep and how much needs to stay in the business. That's my answer to it. Does anyone else want to contribute to that?
Nailed it.
Yeah, I can't echo that stronger. Having the business plan actually it changed the way I related to my job, because now my job's purpose was to fund my dream, because I knew what I was doing it for, right? So it was no longer stressful. It served its proper purpose. So I can't emphasize that enough, to be able to think it all the way through and have it while you're working.
If I plan to have different types of small businesses, i.e. in different industries, can they all be under one LLC? Do I need to mention what all business I intend to do at the time of registering my business?
Bill, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I'll address it. I'm gonna start off by saying it depends. And it would help. I'm not going to ask you to do it now, but but to determine the answer that's best for you, it would help to understand what all those businesses are. And in addition to that, I would say what I've learned over the last 40 years is when it comes to figuring out what business entity, sole proprietor, LLC, C Corp, S Corp, the way to do that is to sit down with your accountant or CPA and discuss your plans. They'll be able to say, given what you're saying, this is probably the best for you, because at the end of the day, it's about the taxes. And then you go to a business attorney or yourself and create whatever that entity is that you and your accountant agreed upon. But there is no one best answer for every business or everybody. So that's why it's key to talk with an accountant to determine what's the best answer for what you're trying to do and accomplish.
Agreed.
Thank you, Bill. Patty, the question is, can you repeat what the manufacturers conference was? The name of that?
I can't, but I'll look for it. If that person will send me their name in the chat, I will look for it and get it to them.
Okay. How can one get a mentor? I am very new to this. You are in the right place. Go ahead, Patty.
If you would like a SCORE mentor, go to raleigh.score.org. Right as you enter the website, there is a tab that says request a mentor. You can request a mentor there. Now, I will say you may not or probably will not get one of us, but we have a whole group of individuals that mentor on a daily basis, and they will get you someone. And if you feel like some of us on this screen have the skills that you want to tap into, we can co-mentor if that's what you request. So that is the way that you get a mentor. And I would say, if you're in business getting started, get a mentor. It is a free service.
Miss
Thanks,
Patty and Dr. Angie, I see a lot of notes to everybody. So can I pay somebody to do these business plans and all this great stuff? Try it first. You'll be amazed. There are a lot of templates, a lot of websites. You know more about your business, your idea than anybody. Any mentor you get will ask you some of the same questions you can start keying out. As you need to fine tune it, mentor can help you. So before you start all these expenses that we're telling you not to do, try it first.
Yeah.
I'm on the last question. Go ahead,
I'm
Jay.
sorry. I was going to say, when I saw that, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Allen, because the thing about going through the process is you'll find out the strengths and the weaknesses and the things that you need to think about. You'll know more about your business going through the process than if you hand it over to somebody else who does this turnkey all the time and can just probably run through, and they'll have templates and they'll slap templates on top of the business plan. It'll look great, but you won't know nearly as much about your business as if you sit down and you go through the process and you work through it and you just ask questions when you get stuck. That's when you want to reach out to a mentor. But if you really want to know your business, and if you're going to be a business owner, you need to know your business, do the business plan and go for it.
Love that. This last question from the Q&A, and then we'll go over to the chat because I see at least 8 new questions, I believe. Do I break everything down to bedding for my spa and retreat?
So is this a situation where you're going to do like you're getting ready to do a retreat and you want to know how to do the financials behind it?
Yeah, so they have a spa service, and it sounds like they do retreats around the spa service. So the question is, do I break everything down to bedding? The answer is yes, but I'll let
absolutely.
you elaborate,
So
Jay.
my wife ran had her own massage therapy business for years and would do private retreats and things like that. I mean, sheets, bedding, all that stuff is an expense, right? So she had to pay for the sheets to come and she had to pay for them to be washed, pay for them to be like the sheet service, right? Oils, incense, everything that she was going to bring for that particular client, she had to work that into her financials. And it's exactly the way Patty went through it. She would go through and say, this is what this is going to cost. This is what I can charge per hour. The difference is what I'm going to make. And then she knew, well, this is what the average therapist makes at these things. So she was actually underpriced when she did that. And so she took her price to fair market value, made even more money, and didn't absorb any expenses on those. Look, even mileage, track your mileage, right? Like, to and from those things, like get every bit of dollar that you can and minimize your expenses as much as possible. Anything you put into it, see if you can get paid for covering those expenses.
Yes, I was talking to a gentleman about a business at one time, and he just was throwing things up in the air, and I had him go back to put his expenses down. And I told him, I said, go all the way down to the toilet paper.
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
So if you're going all the way to the toilet paper, everything else is in there.
I just had a meeting with my CPA, and it was a video meeting, and I was talking about how I was on my second cup of coffee, and she knows I'm sitting in my guest bedroom, and she said, "You're expensing your coffee, right? You drink that coffee every day. You sit down in your home office and work." I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Yeah." So, take it down to absolutely everything that you can do and set that up in your accounting system.
Somebody just asked that question, Jay, and I said that. So, Dr. Allen, what do you mean by manage your expenses? Everything is your expense. I'm driving somewhere, I'm logging it. I'm eating lunch with somebody, I'm logging it. And
I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm a coupon queen. You know what I'm saying? I've saved thousands of dollars already.
That's right. I have an app on here that as soon as I take off from the house, it tracks my drive. And when I get home, then I can swipe one way if it's personal, one way if it's a business expense. And at the end of the year, I just hit send report that goes into my QuickBooks, which then goes to my accountant, and boom, my miles are accounted for and I'm saving money.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all, I hate to cut us off, but we have another presentation coming from Sharon. And also I had asked Jay to talk about how he set his prices. So Jay, will you tell us a little bit about how you set your prices? And then we're going to hear from Sharon.
Sure. So I'll go a little faster because we've covered some of it here in our conversation. I want to make sure, I love listening to Sharon, so I want to make sure I give Sharon plenty of time. When I first started my business, I am a consultant, so very similar to like what Dr. Angie said, or the example that Patty gave. I thought through all of those different variables, but I really, really struggled. I think, Bill, you might have alluded to this too, of, I don't have a product. I am the product. What the product is the knowledge that I carry and the experience I have. So I really, really struggled. I went through the discipline of what Patty showed, and I knew, okay, this is what it's going to cost for me to start up. I'm going to need a laptop. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need internet. I'm going to need so on and so forth, marketing. And I added all of that up as my startup cost. And then I said, okay, that's going to be a startup cost. What is it going to be cost to maintain my steady state of my business? And then I had a growth plan. What's it going to cost me to have a growth plan? And I also wanted a safety net in there as well. So how much do I need to have and build into a safety net before I can then go into expansion? So I went through all of that. And I will tell you, the first mistake that I made is I was working for a large corporation, had great healthcare benefits. I did everything that I should have done that Patty said, except I forgot healthcare. And that rocked my world for the first couple of months. Paying for your own healthcare, I will just say, don't forget that, because as a business owner, you're going to have to figure out how to manage your own healthcare expenses, because there's not a company there to offset that. But I put all that together, and I was really struggling. So what I did was I backwards planned, and I said, okay, this is the lifestyle that I want to have. I still want to put in for retirement. Like, this is how I need to live. What is that dollar amount? And then I took as an individual, and then I kind of backwards planned to what those expenses were. And then I calculated, okay, what do I need to make in a year to be able to meet that dollar amount, to be able to meet that dollar amount for standard of living, right? And then I took that down, and I figured out the same way Dr. Angie did. Okay, what does that break down to in an hourly rate? And I looked at the hourly rate, And when I looked at it, I was like, I don't know, that seems like so much. I'm really uncomfortable with it. I did my first engagement and they said yes immediately. And then it turned into they wanted to extend it. And I found out that I was woefully underpriced. So I fell into that trap. So I had done the process well, but one of the things that I'd forgotten to really do or should have done is reached out to mentors and other people and said, for a project like this, what would be a ballpark of what you would charge? I had mentors and people that I could have reached out to, and I just missed that question. And so luckily, time and place, that client I made money, but boy, they worked me to death for that money. The second time I went in with a totally different price point, I realized that I was in the right place. And that's really kind of how I stuck things. Now I look at projects holistically. So I'll start with my dollar amount, but I'm not going to lie. I have something in there that I call a pain and butt factor. So I know in conversations with certain clients that they're going to be, when you go to I don't know, I used to wait tables and I could tell who was going to tip me a little bit and work me to death. So, I try to look for those people that they're going to be very needy clients. But that's okay. I'm mission driven. I don't mind working for them, but I add a little extra for that, for that pain in the butt factor. So all of that, though, leads to then tracking to, am I still going to make that financial goal that I have at the end of the year? And it does. Pricing sensitivity is kind of one of the things that I really struggle with. So, I did talk to some people about what their rates were. I felt like I was still a little underpriced. And so I just started testing. I got to the point in the business where I had enough clients, I was meeting my financials, and I thought, here's somebody that's coming in and they're interested in talking. I'd love to have their business. I'd love that extra money, but I'm pretty tapped on bandwidth. So I'm going to make it a premium. If they say yes, then, hey, it's really worth it. And they came back and they were like, gosh, really high priced. We talked about this a few minutes ago. Me personally, I wanted to be comfortable with kind of a comeback and confidence on that, right? Like, hey, you're getting a lot. You're getting over 25 years of knowledge here that you don't have in your organization to make things happen, so what's the price that you want to put on that? And we did that and they came back and they were like, you're right. So, it's a journey when it comes to pricing and kind of like what we were saying about when you first launch your business plan. One of the things that Dr. Allen, you said were about the opportunity cost, right? When I think about that, I try to be very, very intentional around that piece. So I do keynote speaking, and for keynote speaking, I'll make a couple $1,000s for an hour just to go and talk. Now there are some times when I will do that same keynote for free to like a group of associations, knowing that there are CEOs and boards sitting there listening to that talk, knowing that somebody from there is likely going to hire me to one of their companies or talk to their boards for those thousands of dollars. So that's where you have to kind of balance things out when it comes from a pricing perspective. And then, for me personally, I know how to read financials. I come from a corporate background. I'm very comfortable looking at my P&L and understanding my expenses and how to control those expenses and all of that. But it's not what I want to do day to day. And I don't enjoy it at all. So one of the things that I had in my business plan, no offense, like I'm not good at it. But one of the things I had in my business plan was hire an accountant, hire a CPA. And so, I answered earlier in a question, I use QuickBooks. It's a mental thing. I love sending my own invoices. It makes me feel good when I send the invoice out. So I do that. And then I have an accountant in the back end that makes sure that my bank is talking to my QuickBooks, which is talking to my American Express, which is how I track my expenses. And then I have a CPA that just says, here, Jay, here's where you're tracking for your taxes. Here are some things that you probably need to do. How old's that computer you're working on? Are you drinking enough coffee? How are you managing your expenses? So I have that person that's there to help guide me. But really, just to kind of answer the question around the pricing, I really had to make sure that I backwards planned. What is it going to take me to live? I don't want to sacrifice. I've worked so hard, my life to build to a destination, a retirement destination, right? I want to be Bill, man. I want to be Bill. I want to be, on the golf course, driving my RV around. I didn't want to sacrifice that for the passion of starting my business. So I kept that goal in hand and I said, this is what I got to build to. This is what my price needs to do because I have this much bandwidth. I got this much energy. And that's how I kind of found my pricing to hit what my goals are. So Patty, I hope that answers the question. I'm happy to answer questions from the group.
That's great. All right, we're going to move on to Sharon right now. And if we have some time, we'll come back, okay? Thank you, Sharon.
All right. My goodness. There's some good information being shared here, y'all. Yeah, there's just been such fantastic information shared here, and there's so much great information that's available to all of us. Thank you to the interwebs and to organizations like SCORE. And I was going to talk about self-care because I like talking about it. I think it's so important for us to keep top of mind as we do this thing called entrepreneurship or business ownership. But then it got me thinking that there's so much information out there about self-care that I don't know what I could say that would be different, right? So, we all know, how we get healthy, how we can eat well, or how we move our bodies and how we take care of our minds. Mindfulness is all over the place. The importance of community and mentor support, like we've been talking about, that we all need this inspiration and support, particularly if we're doing something like this. How we have to have systems, like Jay was speaking to so pointedly about QuickBooks and systems that we set up in order to manage our time efficiently and our energy efficiently. How we need to keep learning, how we need to keep mastering our craft, right? So we know all these things. So, but why don't we do them? Why don't we do what we know we need to do? And we all do it to some one degree or another. So what gets in the way of us staying in alignment with our deepest intentions, whether it's to build a business that allows us to make the impact we want to make on the planet in a way that allows us to experience as much joy as possible, or we want to get healthy or whatever it is. What gets in the way of us staying in alignment with what matters to us most consistently? Because we can do it for a few days in a row. Then it gets hard. And so it's really difficult to have the capacity to be with the discomfort of taking new action. Like some of the things we're talking about, like, Jay and Patty were talking about you being the one to create your business plan so that you could become more intimate with your business. And it's uncomfortable because we don't know, we haven't done it yet. So it's hard to have the capacity to take actions that we're uncomfortable with if we have this incessant voice in our head telling us that something's wrong with us, or we're not good enough, or we're not good at finances, or we won't make it, we can't be successful, it's too hard. And sometimes it's just operating behind the scenes, underneath the surface, sabotaging our efforts. And so this negative talk can really become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think I talked about this before. If we're not careful, we can continuously say to ourselves, this is too hard, I'll never be successful. And we'll behave ourselves into that belief. We will behave ourselves into that belief, often unconsciously. Or that negative self-talk will lead us to, engage in destructive coping habits, just to kind of drown out that voice, overeating, procrastination, overindulging in one way or another, or pretending, all in an effort to try and drown out or overcome that negative voice. And maybe folks in our lives communicated through words or actions or inaction, actually, that we were less than, that we were undeserving, maybe unintentionally, that we're not good enough somehow. And even this culture in many ways can definitely marginalize us, brown and Black folks. So many of us have this voice inside of our heads that tells us we're not good enough, we're not strong enough, we're not smart enough, we're not resourced enough, fill in the blank. And when I left corporate after 20 years in January of 2020 to be full-time in my business, I had already had my business up and running for 12 years, but I was doing it part-time and not ready to pull the trigger. I had a 6-figure salary, fancy title, all the things. And when I finally made the decision and created a plan, like Patty was talking about, man, that inner critic was busy. Who do you think you are? You don't have enough skill to do this. Why would anybody work with you? All the things. But fortunately, at that point, I had done a lot of work on those harmful thinking patterns. So the narratives didn't really have as much power over my decisions. Plus, I had a lot of support. I had mentors with an S. I had family who supported me. I had healthy habits to support me in staying steady and grounded. So we all have this inner critic, but think about this. Our inner critic was manufactured. It was installed somewhere along the way, maybe unintentionally by parents, definitely by society, by culture, perhaps by trauma. It was created, conditioned, and cultivated. We're not born with inner critics or judging minds. It's not who we truly are. They're just stories that we've accumulated over our lifetime. So in other words, it's not who we truly are, even though it feels like truth. And it's often what's in the way of you having a successful business. So this inner critic is often a combination of doubt, perhaps rumination and fear, and it just literally ultimately sabotages us. It keeps us small. And you know, like Dr. Allen said, it keeps us from just doing the thing. It keeps us fearful, lacking confidence, keeps us hesitant. And then we're less resilient when someone doesn't buy our product. We're less flexible, and we're less compassionate toward ourselves. And the inner critic is often fueled by our negativity bias. And this is just how our brains work. Our brains are trained, designed to focus on what's not going well. So that's why you could be doing a presentation of 30 people and you'll get 30 surveys and 29 people will say, oh my God, you were amazing. One person will say, that shirt looked a little untucked. And that's the one thing that will stay with you. It'll crowd out all the other goodness. So that's just what our brains are doing. It's a protective mechanism that was designed to keep us safe. So this critic isn't bad. This critic is trying to keep us safe. But depending on how we relate to the critic, it can lead to stress unnecessarily, self-doubt. It can sabotage us if we're not relating to it in a way that's skillful. So I talk a lot about mindfulness, and I'm sure many of you have know what mindfulness is. It's simply this practice of staying in touch with your experience, staying in the present moment without getting carried away by thought, but staying present and grounded in the present moment, being aware of what's happening up in our minds in a gentle, non-judgmental manner. Just kind of getting to know how our minds are working, because it's our minds that are actually creating the life we're living. It's our minds. It's what our minds are telling us about what's happening. That's actually creating our experience of life. So it's important to understand what's going on up there. In what ways is my mind sabotaging me? In what ways are the ways that I'm thinking not serving me? And when we're being mindful, when we're actually paying attention, we can become more aware of what's arising in the moment. And we can notice just how quickly the critic jumps in. You know, for example, we can do an email campaign and the conversion rate, for example, could be low. And our critic will pop in and say, see, this will never work. This is what we're talking about. Instead of saying, what did I learn? Way to go for being courageous and actually taking a step to build your business. What did I learn from that? Might I tweak the subject line? Was the offer compelling enough? Did I have the right target market? Was my price point appropriate for my target market? What did I learn? Instead of what can happen sometimes unconsciously is it just fuels the inner critic. If we're not aware of what's happening, and the only way we can become more aware of what's happening is by paying attention with compassion. And when the critic is in the driver's seat and we're repeating these harsh words to ourselves, it's going to be hard. It's probably not going to work. No one will buy what I have to offer. I should price myself really low. These critical thoughts, the body responds because it's connected. The body perceives it as an attack and it triggers stress hormones. Literally, it triggers stress. And sometimes it's a low level stress. And that low level stress is what can end up sabotaging us. So the body responds when we're not aware of our critic and we allow the critic to be in the driver's seat. So when we practice mindfulness, and when I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about practicing in two ways. One way is the formal practice, kind of just taking a moment and maybe 5 or 10 minutes and just pausing and sitting. Or you can even take a walk and just paying attention to the breath, just coming back to the moment. So there's a formal way of practicing, and in that we're strengthening the ability to come back to the present moment instead of getting constantly hijacked by the mind. And then there's the informal practice. Can we be present when we're speaking to someone? Can we wash the dishes mindfully? Can we practice training our mind to stay so that we have agency over whatever choices we make and how to behave, how to show up, as opposed to, again, getting hijacked by the patterns in mind? And we can take a curious, when we notice the critic is flaring up, for example, we can explore taking a curious and compassionate stance toward the inner critic. Compassionate stance, say, oh, this is difficult to do something that I'm not familiar with. Of course, my inner critic is flaring up. It's okay. What if nothing is going wrong? This is simply giving me an opportunity to strengthen ways of being that are going to serve me. And that can generate some grounding that is necessary if you're building a business. So mindfulness really supports the presence we need to take a beat and to shift our attention and power, frankly, away from the inner critic so that we can see more clearly. We can tap into our wisdom. It strengthens this practice of strengthening the mind and training the mind to stay. It strengthens the mind, again, which is critical to building our business. We can observe how our mind is serving us or not serving us. And we can practice shifting these deeply ingrained mental patterns that, again, are what get in the way. It's the inner game. So when we remember to practice throughout our day, this act of watching our minds can reveal to us the choice points and how we're responding to what our minds are doing. We can see the flare-ups of the critic. You know, maybe when Patty and Jay were talking about doing your own business plan, your critic may have jumped in and said, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. I'll never be good at finances. I just need somebody else to do it for me. Those points right there become invitations to either strengthen that pattern, strengthen the power the inner critic has over your life, or it's an invitation to relate to the critic in a way that's compassionate and curious, to say, what am I strengthening here? Am I strengthening faith or am I strengthening fear? That's the choice point. It's kind of like that saying, when we ask for patience, we don't get more patience, we get opportunities to practice patience. And in the practice of being patient, we get more patient. So it's the same here. If we practice relating to our inner critic in a way where it doesn't run the show, it doesn't run the show as much. And we're braver, we're more confident, regardless of the course that our business takes. You know, sometimes I like to visualize the inner critic as an anxious child, because that's often when our critic was formed, when we were younger. This anxious child who's just like, what are you talking about? We're doing what? So it's like the part of us that needs patience and care and reassurance. We don't need to go to war with it and say, sit and be quiet so I can do this thing. So most of us would respond with compassion if we saw a child suffering. And so that's the invitation that I'm suggesting, is that mind, that part is there. I haven't met someone who doesn't have that inner critic. It's louder in some folks than in others, but I think we all have it. Maybe it's just a human experience. But for people who I see are successful, and by success I'm defining are living lives that they choose, they relate to their inner critics much differently than folks who don't. And so again, the invitation here is to, one, perhaps establish some kind of practice, a steady practice, like Dr. Angie had mentioned. It doesn't take a lot, 5 minutes a day, perhaps taking a walk and just being mindful, not spending that time ruminating or planning or scheduling things in your mind, but really what's going on in my mind right now? What's going on in my body right now? Can I breathe? Can I ground myself? Can I find that place of resilience and faith? And part of it is to practice making friends with our inner critic, befriending her or him. Bring them along for the ride. Sometimes my inner critic will flare up and I'll be like, okay, let's go practice. Let's go sit together. I don't need to go to war with you anymore because you belong too, but I know better now. So you can be in service to something bigger. And it takes practice. We can acknowledge it as part of our experience, but we don't need to believe it, and we don't need to follow its lead. We don't need to indulge it out of habit. But this takes a willingness to sit and to feel and sit with the experiences that might be uncomfortable or challenging. It takes practice, but that's why we have mentors. That's why we have coaches. That's why we perhaps are really particular about who we surround ourselves with, the boundaries that we set. I love this quote from Princess Hemphill. She says, "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And if that's not happening, there's not an appropriate boundary. And that becomes really important when we're in a space where we're growing, where we're building something, when the inner critic is going to be active. And one last thing I wanted to mention, if there's time, I hope, is that sometimes I've run across this. Sometimes people will say, well, I need my inner critic to keep me, I need my inner critic to keep me on the ball. Otherwise, I'll just lay on the couch and chill out. I need my inner critic. But there's a difference between the inner critic and the practice of discernment. The inner critic's voice is often fear-based and hostile and coercive, even subtly. The voice sounds different. It feels different in the body. Discernment, there's a clarity. There's understanding that, oh, this is serving me and this is not. It's compassionate. It feels more wholesome. And discernment doesn't involve any shame or judgment. It's clarity about what's skillful and what's not. So, and often many of us were taught, we were trained using coercion. Let's put it that way. We were shamed in a lot of ways to behave a certain way. Yeah. And my invitation is, I don't know if that's necessary. Maybe we don't need to shame ourselves into doing what we need to do. Maybe we need to be compassionate, love ourselves into this life that we want to live. Let's try that instead. It doesn't have the residue that shame does. And sometimes it's hard to tell if the inner voice, negative inner voice, is active. And that's when we can really tune into the body. Because the body will often signal when the inner critic is at play. My shoulders up, am I agitated? Am I procrastinating? Am I fearful? Does my body feel tight? We can just pay attention and see what is she or he here to tell me? What information is here for me to learn? What am I strengthening here? Because we're cultivating something every moment. Every decision we make, we're strengthening something. We could be strengthening anxiety. We could be strengthening fear, or we could be strengthening faith. We could be strengthening patience. But in our behavior, we're strengthening something. So the invitation here is to be deliberate about what you're strengthening. And so that was really what I wanted to talk about, because I coach a lot of folks, and I've coached folks for over a decade now around the sort of the nuts and bolts of how to transition from a divorce, or grow their business, or whatever it is. And what's always been the difference between folks who actually saw some consistent success and the folks who kind of had some success and then petered out was the inner game. And so it's at least as important, if not more, than understanding the fundamentals of how to build a business. We have to understand how our minds are working to serve us or not, and to take care of our minds just like we would take care of our bodies. And mindfulness is a big part of that. Befriending the negative inner critic is part of that as well. So that's what I wanted to offer. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to field them. I think we have a little bit of time, right, Patty?
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes, but thank you so much, Sharon. You really got me ready to rest tonight.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty.
Dr. Angie, I think we...
Clear liquids. They got on me about this 2 years ago. Clear liquids.
That's it. It's a small change and it makes a huge difference.
Yes. We're right up on our time to end the meeting, and thank you all. It was such an active session tonight. I hope you all benefited from it. I will say again, please come back next week, because some of your financial questions may be answered by Sterling Porter, and Bill Davis will also be co-presenting with him next week, and we'll all be here. So if it's something related to finances, please come back, and we hope we'll get those taken care of for you. Thank you all so much. We're going to go ahead and close. We hope you all enjoyed the meeting. We certainly did. And we appreciate you following the content that we produce. And I wanted to mention, we're going to do a government contracting class starting at the end of May. It's going to be 3 weeks. And Dr. Angie and Bernie Salter, who is also a SCORE mentor, will be doing that. And they have been working on it now for 2 months. And they are, I mean, it is going to be government contracting as you've never seen it. It's going to actually show you how to do it. Beautiful. So you all get that on your calendar. It'll start, I believe it's May 26th, and then 2 weeks after that. But they have never done it this way before. They have the knowledge, and they are strictly tailoring this for our audience. So y'all get that on your calendars. Good night, everybody. This was wonderful. Take care, and we will see you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody.
Take good care of yourselves.
Good night, everyone.